storm, lending a hand to help clean up and get the businesses back on their feet. Please join me in giving a warm Rotary Zoom welcome to a true champion of downtown, Ed Wolverton.
Hey, everybody. Thank you. Quite the rousing introduction. Thank you, Rob. I get to do a fair amount of these kinds of presentations, but I have to admit this is the first one that I'm doing in a Zoom format, and especially one without a lot of visuals. I find a lot of people respond to pictures, and that prompts a lot of understanding for certain things. And without doing it this time, it'll be another challenge for all of us to absorb and to get through this presentation. And I'm going to work to try to keep this rather brief. I wanted to try to keep about 10 minutes or so, and we're going to do three things really. We'll give you a little bit of background about Wilmington Downtown Incorporated, why we should care, why we're involved with it. I do want to talk about some of the short-term and long-term growth needs and some development that we've had over time, where we're headed over the next few years. And then I'm going to close with a bigger conversation about how we have adopted as an organization and as a community through the pandemic and other times that are occurring right now to keep our central business district and our downtown going. So not everyone quite fits on the screen here, so just the screen I have up. How many people were here prior to 2000? How many people lived here before 2000? All right, so a fair amount of you. So if you remember back downtown any time before 2000, it was a much different place than it was today. And there was a group that started, that was our initial precursor for Wilmington Downtown Incorporated. That group was called Downtown Area Revitalization Effort, or DARE. It actually goes back to 1977, and it occurred after the malls had opened, many businesses had left, downtown had become seedy. It was a lot of vacancies here, and civic leaders really recognized that bolder steps needed to be taken to make improvements downtown. And at that point, they had already seen some revitalization efforts in other communities, and they had seen the rise and fall of pedestrian malls. That was an effort that was done in the 70s and even some in the 80s, where some cities took their main shopping street, closed it down to become a pedestrian mall, kind of like a mall, if you will, except just no vehicles. In most cases, those malls didn't really succeed. Prior to that, in the 1960s, you saw what was called the urban renewal phase. That was where the federal government took all kinds of money, gave it to communities as a way to address what they saw as urban ills at the time. There were some good projects that came out of that, but a lot of bad projects too. That's where you saw a lot of one-way street systems go in throughout the entire country. You saw the loss of historic buildings. They didn't want, people thought, well, we didn't want these old decrepit buildings. We want something new, one-story, aluminum siding and parking right in front. So we had been through a couple of iterations, and with the advent of DARE, there was really an understanding that there had to be a public-private partnership at play. Federal and state government and local government could not do downtown development alone. The private sector, the private property owners also realized they couldn't do it without government help. So it really formed the basis of DARE. And this model has been adopted now throughout the entire country, and actually throughout the entire world now, these public-private partnerships as a way to bring our public sector and our private sector together to make improvements for the common good and to improve and strengthen our area. So as Rob mentioned, we have 880 businesses in downtown, 10,900 people that work in downtown. That makes us the largest business center, the largest employment center, and if you want to throw in things like cultural center and government center, all of that is part of our downtown scene. And just to provide additional context, if you took all the businesses at Mayfair, you took all the businesses at Independence Mall, you combine them together, that would still be less businesses and less employees that we have in downtown. So we hear a lot of talk about economic development, a lot of talk about How do we save and help our small businesses? Well, downtown is really the backbone, the center place for all of these efforts. So that's why part of the work we do is so important. So we are a public-private partnership. We work very closely with New Hanover County, the city of Wilmington as well. I did spy a couple of board members here, so give some good reviews. Nancy Bullock is a longtime WDI board member. David Randy, I think I saw him on the call. So these are folks that are involved with the organization in one way or another. We do have committees. In addition to our board is 38 people. So does anyone have 38 bosses? Am I the only one with 38 bosses? Yeah. So yeah, there's one of them. There's Rob. Yeah, he's got New Hanover County residents as his boss. So I have 38 bosses, and so that's a good group that we have put together. They represent different economic sectors of downtown as well as the community as a whole. And it's really important for us to have collaborations with other groups and organizations. The Chamber of Commerce has a seat on our board. UNCW has a seat on our board. CFCC does, the city, the county. So we really have deliberately stacked our board so that it is including the downtown business and property owners, but also includes other voices in the community. And that's important for us as we build consensus and ideas and programs that will improve our town and our city. And as Rob mentioned, a very simple mission statement, if you will. We want to stimulate investment and activity in downtown. It's really that simple. And we do a lot of different work in that way. We will do promotions. We will do marketing. We get involved with urban design. While business recruitment, business retention is our main emphasis, we recognize that we can do all the recruitment in the world, but if there is a place that people do not want to be, if it's run down, if it's sad sack, if it is a place that is scary, that is unsafe, that it's going to make our economic development job more difficult. So we work on all those things, taking a very holistic view in our economic development efforts. So let's shift gears a little bit. We'll talk about growth. As Rob mentioned, in 2019, we attracted over $260 million of new investment in downtown, 42 new businesses, 240 new jobs, just in downtown, just in 1 year. That investment number, 260 million, is a record. We have been tracking that very closely for the last decade. We have never exceeded 220 had been our previous record, so now we're at 260. So it's just a phenomenal amount of investment. And we track that based on building permits, based on property sales. So sometimes you may see groups or organizations talking about, well, our economic impact is this amount of number. That's a totally different calculation, economic impacts as opposed to actual investment. So we use actual investment, not just the impact. We think that is a better gauge for truly representing what's happening in our center city. We also have made some great gains in some long-term plans for redeveloping our downtown. I mentioned the DARE days, and one of the outproducts towards the end of DARE, when we were transitioning to Wilmington Downtown Incorporated, was the creation of the Vision 2020 plan. You probably have heard some reference in that in the media. You may have read through it before, but that was a rather revolutionary plan at that time. And it set a number of different long-term goals and strategies. And to our city's credit and to our county's credit, that has been a template and a playbook that we have implemented over the last 18 years now to move our downtown forward. And to give you an example, one of the things that plan talked about was the need to build more residential activity in downtown. While we have the historic area that's super important to us, we didn't have a lot of other residences that were nearby. So Vision 2020 said, we need to build more people in downtown, have more people living here, because they'll be the ones that will use our shops, that will use our restaurants, go to our attractions, our museums on a regular basis, on a routine basis, 2 or 3 times a week, if not more. So that was a key thing for us. And you look today, what's happening, we had City Block Apartments was really our first one to open in 2014. This year, last year we had the opening of, the actual start of construction for River Place, which was the replacement of the old Water Street deck, which that was an actual urban renewal project that I mentioned to you back in the 60s. The conversion of that going to residential, as well as some commercial ground floor stuff on the retail. Sawmill Point Apartments has already been opened at that point. City Block Apartments had been opened at that point. We had announcements and starting for construction of the flats on Front, right at the corner of Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard and Front Street, kind of as you come into downtown, right by the Isabel Holmes Bridge, that Sawmill Point. In front of that will be flats on Front. They have actually started to open another 275 units there. River Place, as I mentioned, that has really been a major accomplishment getting that project done. It took literally 25 years for a project to come together there. People are now moving in. I believe there are 10 residences that are part of the project now that have moved in, and more are certainly coming as part of that project. We've also seen onesie-twosie kinds of duplex houses go up, especially in the Brooklyn Arts District. So building that residential base has been part of our long-term strategy and key for improving downtown, and we're well on the way of doing that. And hotel was another thing. We recognized that the hospitality business could be bigger and we could do more if we had things like the convention center. I believe that opened in 2011, if that's right. Someone can correct me. But that was important. We now have added hotel infrastructure to further support that. And the Aloft Hotel is now under construction. That's the latest one. It's right next to the Coastline Conference Center. They hope to be open by the end of this year. We'll see if they make it or not. Construction has been ongoing, but it's been a little bit difficult for some of the crews to be there working full capacity to keep up with social distancing. So in the meantime, even with this COVID-19 and the pandemic, we're still seeing significant growth and construction activity underway. The Gaylord building, for those of you who remember that, near the old Belks and the 200 block of North Front Street, that building had literally been sitting vacant for 30 years or more. New investors have bought that building. A complete and total renovation of that building is underway. It's supposed to be finished this year. It's going to be creating what they call a co-working space. So if you've been to Tech Mountain, if you know about what they do and how they go about their work, that is the kind of vibe they're going to be creating at that building. And that's another major milestone and step forward for us. We've also seen a lot of smaller projects that have been happening despite the pandemic. Bourbon Street Restaurant, if you know that building, they have been totally refreshed and renovated. Fat Tony's has been renovated inside and out. The Dr. Bland dentist has bought the old Serpentarian. He's renovating that building and we'll have a dental spa there. That's underway and nearing completion. So there's been a number of buildings that have been undergoing renovations as well as part of the shutdown that's happened. Many businesses have stepped in to refresh and to make investments and to move their buildings along too. So as those are getting back open, we're still seeing that investment and growth and activity that's happening. So lastly, we'll talk about how things have shifted. And you may have questions about some other things, and I may have answers, I may not. But our really expectations, our issues really affected us on March 12th. Rob mentioned that we do partner with the city and the county, so we have economic development contracts with them. We have a municipal service district that also provides funding for initiatives. But we do a lot of money that we raise privately. And if you've been to a Downtown Sundown concert before or know people that have, that's one of our organization's biggest fundraisers. We also do a luncheon each spring, and we also do an event each fall that focuses on local people. So on March 12th, the governor issued his first order about mass gatherings of less than 100 people. And our spring luncheon, with over 350 people reserved and buying tickets, had to be canceled. It was scheduled for March 13th. our speaker had come all the way down from Nashville. We were ready to hear about it, but we had to postpone that event because of the new restrictions. Then on March 17th is when the restrictions came out for closing the bars and restaurants and further reductions on mass gatherings. So at that point, moving from we're doing our big economic series luncheon, we're going to reveal all our economic development numbers for the year, to, oh my gosh, we need to do things to help our businesses. So we very quickly worked with our local officials to create the option for curbside pickup, converting some parking spaces. You could quickly use them, available for takeout or pickup items. We worked with all of our businesses who was offering curbside services, whether they were a restaurant or retailer. We quickly assembled a new website, a new page on our website to catalog who was offering curbside, what they were, any specials, and aggressively promoted that from the very beginning. And we are continuing to update that still almost on a daily basis since then. We also had to figure out how we could help these businesses even more. And with the shutdown, there were lots of businesses that were really hurt and still are being hurt. So we had someone with a group called the Longleaf Foundation, the local group here, and they came to us with an offer, an idea. They said, look, we want to put $20,000 in to help downtown businesses. Can you do something? So with that $20,000, we put together within a week a program that we called our Recover, Restock, and Reopen program, R3, if you will. And it quickly grew to us raising about $110,000. And we created a very simple one-page application for our merchants. We ended up attracting 148 applications for our $3,000 grant award. We wondered if $3,000 would be too little, if it would make an impact, but yet 148 businesses applied for that. At the time, we were only going to be able to fund 6 or 7, but because of the donations we were able to raise, we now have awarded 37 of those so far. The donations we're still accepting donations as they come in. We will turn around and make more donations back to the businesses. They are clearly being impacted, and we put almost no restrictions on the money, so they could use it any way they thought could help their business, whether it's payroll or rent or utilities or restocking in some cases. So a phenomenal program, and we were just blown away with the community support for that as we've gone forward. And then now the county has now just, you may have seen, put out a program similar to that, a lot more money, $10,000 going to those businesses. And that was just announced yesterday, I think. So great that we're able to help our small businesses, and Rob and county staff just did an amazing job pulling all that together. A lot of coaching and communications with our merchants throughout all this, coaching people through the stimulus programs, what's out there, what's available, any grant programs, giving them information, giving them links, helping to guide them through the navigation that comes from dealing with federal and state bureaucracies. A new program that has surfaced is this something called Downtown Alive. The Downtown Business Alliance is spearheading that effort, and it's modeled after what's being done in many other cities across the country. As you think about the restrictions we have in place now, while restaurants can now reopen, they are limited to 50% of their capacity. So the Downtown Alive model suggests that, well, can we add more sales space outdoors of the business to offset that loss of 50%? So there's lots of complications with this. I saw Councilmember Lawler, I think, is a member of this group, and Paul's been devoting a lot of time and effort into putting this together. Lots of complications when you go to closing the streets, and alcohol beverage control also had to weigh in on it, and that was a key issue going that has apparently been resolved. And so we are working through lots of details on that. So stay tuned. There's definitely a lot of interest and support. This is something we're seeing in a lot of other communities across the country. I did mention our Downtown Sundown, so we are on standby for that. Typically, they go from Memorial Day weekend to Labor Day. Right now, there's a limitation on outdoor gatherings at 25 people. If you've been to one of our shows, we have a few more than 25. So unless there is a major expansion into the summer, we're just on standby with that. But we're also having to figure out how to offset the revenues that we normally use those funds as a fundraiser for. So that's been another management challenge for us. And then, of course, the latest thing now is the George Floyd protests that are happening across the country. They are here in Wilmington as well. 3 straight days of protests here now so far. The one Saturday was very peaceful. The organizers, including the Black Lives Matter folks and the NAACP, really worked hard to put together an event that was respectful and peaceful. The event Sunday was some other groups that were not a part of the local NAACP or Black Lives Matter. That one was a little more touch and go in terms of the activities that occurred. Our police department and our sheriff's department, I thought, did an extraordinary job in very difficult and sometimes chaotic situations to really make sure that the constitutional rights of protesters were respected, but public safety and private property was also protected. And there was another protest last night that was more on the peaceful side. There will be more protests, we think, today, and I know there's another one scheduled for tomorrow. So we are working very closely with the police department. I've been on the phone quite a lot this morning with them about how to best approach this, and I just have to applaud the work that they're doing to make sure that these are safe and peaceful gatherings. So with that, I think I probably have gone more than my allotted time, so I will stop and take questions if you have them, or just yield the floor to Eric.
Yes, well, thank you very much. This is Cleve. Before we get into the questions, I just want to go over the ground rules of how we've been doing these questions for you, Ed. If everybody who would like to ask a question, and I'm sure there'll be several of them, go to the participants screen, and there's a little icon at the bottom of your screen on your computer that shows participants. I'm looking at it now. We have 63 people here. That's a very good number, so I'm sure people are interested in what Ed has to say. So if you would like to ask a question on that participant screen, you will see a blue hand like this. And all you do is click on that to say raise hand. And that will alert us that we do have people who would like to ask a question. And then Ed can answer that, and then we'll go on to the next one. So in order of how they came, NC State alum, there's so many NC State alums here, I'm not sure who this is, but could you unmute yourself and let us know what your question is, please?
This NC State alum is actually an alumna of the University of South Carolina, but my husband is, and this is Mimi Cunningham.
Hey Mimi, go ahead.
My question concerns Carolina farming. What are the prospects of something, preferably a grocery store, reopening in that space?
Thank you. I hope everyone heard the question. It was about the Farmer on Front, the grocery store that came in across the street from the post office. They were somewhat of a victim of Hurricane Florence, and there was damage done to the building. They have continued to hold out hope that they would be able to reopen a boutique grocery store there. And we think it would be a great fit. In some respects, it was almost 2 years before its time. With River Place was a little bit delayed, but they're adding 170 units there where the Water Street deck used to be. So I mentioned that critical long-term vision of having more residences that could support the shops. They would have been prime positioned when River Place opens to have them be almost part of their target market. They wouldn't rely exclusively on them, but they would be a big piece of it. So the family that owns Farmer on Front, it still controls the building, and they are continuing to hold out hope that they will be able to reopen and I think we'll know more about them later on in the summer. In the meantime, we are getting more interest from national grocery stores that are active in the market. They do look very closely at demographics, and right now we don't quite have the number of residences that they typically look for. Again, hearkening back, that's why the Flats on Front, River Place, Sawmill Point, City Block, that's why Pier 33 apartments, that's why all those things are so important, because once we build that residential base, that will help justify the market to a user like a grocery store.
Okay, thank you very much for that question. We do have a question in the chat window. I do prefer, just to sort of keep things straight and in order, if you would have a question, please hit that blue button that says raise hand. But this is a question from Anne, who says, great presentation. What is the anticipated completion of Water Street around River Place? And what are plans for the 4th of July fireworks? Ed?
Okay, I don't know the plans for July 4th fireworks just yet. A lot's going to depend again on what the size limitations may be through mass gatherings. Water Street's a unique place right now, as Nancy Bullock can tell you. There's 3 different projects that are happening. One is that at River Place, they are redoing the street as part of a project that's putting a new water line, sewer line, and storm drain that's going from Market Street all the way past the Hotel Ballast, or some of you may know it as the Hilton. So that project has been going on for several years, and it's nearing completion. So the last phase right now is they are putting on the finishing coat for the street in front of River Place, but there is still more work to be done to connect back those new infrastructure pieces to connect all that together. A second project that's going on right now is from the Coast Guard, and the General Services Administration is the government entity that kind of manages all this, and they are upgrading the dock of where the Diligence is or was, if you want to use that term, as well as in front of the courthouse. This sounds way overly dramatic, but over time, the courthouse and the dock have been slowly falling into the river. So they are reinforcing that to prevent that from happening. And that project is going on, and that has probably another year before that piece is finished. And then the city's going to come in with a refresh of the walkway in front of the federal courthouse as well. So that's a second project that's underway. And River Place, of course, has another piece, and there's 2 streets that are abutting River Place. So Chestnut Street, which the same street that Copper Penny is on, is going to be restored as a street. In the 1960s, that was actually the ramp into the parking deck. So Chestnut is being restored, and the street will now go all the way down to Water Street. That has to be done. And then Gray Street on the north side of the building is also being updated. A new parking deck is there that will be serving all of the community, but also River Place. And some parking now is available in that deck. But Gray Street will be the first one done, and then they'll come back, and that should be done this summer. And then later in the fall, they should get Chestnut Street reopened and reestablished in some way too. So lots of different things happening there. It's frustrating, but we are seeing the light at the end of the tunnel finally.
Okay, we do have a number of questions in the queue here, and I'm going to ask our questioners to be succinct in your question, and Ed, you also, because we know we want to try to get as many of these questions answered as quickly as we can. Chance Lambeth is next. Chance, you will need to unmute yourself, and then once you do that, go ahead and ask your question of Ed Wolverton.
Hi, Ed. Thanks for being on. My question was somewhat addressed regarding the grocery store, but I guess how do they plan, or what is they plan to get around the lack of parking or convenient parking for a grocery store? Because I think that's one of the things that hurt farming on front. It's very hard to just pop in, grab something, and get back out. So has that been thought about?
It definitely has, and looking at a tandem with a parking garage is a smart way to go about it. if you know, you probably know, Chance, the city also controls a key parcel right at the corner of 3rd and Martin Luther King as you come into down towards the PPT side of that block. They're calling that the Gateway Project. They did an request for proposals. A developer did respond. In that project includes a 20,000 square foot grocery store and also a parking deck right there. So that is the kind of solution that would make more sense, but also letting people being able to walk back and forth to the grocery store. I mean, when you think about places that are much more urbanized like New York City, people still go to the grocery store, but they do it differently. They don't buy a week's worth of groceries at a time. They might only buy a day or two worth of groceries at a time. So they're carrying 1 or 2 bags, not 5 or 6 bags. I tend to go once or twice a week. I mean, once or twice every couple of weeks. So it's a different mindset in urban areas when you're shopping, but we still have to accommodate people with cars. And so that's going to be one of the better solutions, is if we can tie it into quick and convenient parking.
Okay, let's quickly get a question from Terry Smith. Terry, would you please turn on your, or rather turn off your mute, unmute your speaker. I'm trying to do it, but I'm not having any success. Terry, you'll have to do it yourself. And we're not getting,
Okay.
So let's, yeah, go ahead, Terry.
Sure. Ed, and I don't know to what extent you can speak to this, but can you talk about conventions activity, pre, COVID, pandemic shutdown, and how much the good work y'all been doing is helping, that cause out, and what may be lined up after all this?
Yes, it's a very important component for our downtown, and we finally were getting to the point where we had enough hotel capacity that was within walking distance to go after some of the bigger conventions. We've been pretty good over the last 5 or 6 years with getting regional and state groups, but we were beginning to see a interest from southeastern United States, and we're not quite big enough for some national conventions, but we were beginning to get on that radar screen. Part of it was having enough hotel rooms. So with the Embassy Suites coming online and them opening, the Marriott Courtyard, the Hampton, now the Aloft under construction. So all of those things fit in very well, and that is a great way to augment our existing shops and restaurants. And so a key part of our strategy is to continue to nurture that convention business, and they really are important for us going forward.
Okay, we have a question from our president. Eric, go ahead.
Hey, Ed, a question. My wife and I left a walk on the Riverwalk downtown, and last weekend we saw some families down there with kids looking for bathrooms. The bathroom at the foot of Market seems to be overrun with homeless people. What's happening along that front?
Yeah, it's a vexing problem with restrooms, and there's a really long answer. There are some new restrooms going in as part of the North Waterfront Park, so those will be open next year. There's also public restrooms that are available in the Market Street parking deck on 2nd Street, 2nd and Market. The issue that is now facing the community with restrooms, especially along the Riverwalk, is that you have to meet what's called CAMA, Coastal Area Management Authority regulations. So you can't just put a restroom in there. It has to be, if there's flooding or if anything happens where wastewater could get out into the river, that has to be protected. And that drives the cost way up to put in more restrooms. We've worked with the city to look at adding more, upgrading what's there at the visitor center. It's not very cost practical to do it. That leads to a second question about the use of the visitor center by homeless people, by groups that are trying to help homeless people. That's a whole nother, I could do a whole presentation on just that. But we are making strides. The new North Waterfront Park will have public restrooms. That will help alleviate some of it. But right now, for the southern part of downtown, we're still trying to figure out how we can afford a viable solution there.
Okay, thank you, Ed. We have 2 more people with questions, and then we have a couple of announcements. So President Eric or Shall we get those two questions going?
Yeah, let's get them going.
Okay, we have Kathy and then iPhone, whoever that might be. Kathy, go ahead with your question for Ed, please.
Okay, earlier in your presentation, you mentioned the renovation of the Belk building. There are some of us that have come since there was a Belk building downtown. Could you give us an idea of where that location is?
So it's also called the Gaylord Building, and it actually had a maybe a Kresge moniker at one point. So 226 North Front Street.
Okay.
So Belk was on Front Street for a while, then it moved to the what's now the library, and then it moved from what's now the library to the mall. So 200 block to about 226 North Front Street. I usually refer to it as the Gaylord Building.
Okay, thank you.
All right, and then I don't know who this is, but iPhone, please go ahead with your question, please. You're unmuted. Is that Albert?
Yeah.
Go ahead with your question, Albert.
Yeah, I was just going to comment too. He mentioned about all the activities and buildings downtown. I don't think and I'm sure he's very aware of all the old historic churches that have been there longer than me, dating First Baptist and St. James and First Presbyterian and the AME churches down there. They've been there for well over 150 to 200 years. So, in thinking about the mainstays downtown, I believe we'd be amiss to not mention those, Ed, and I'm sure you're very aware, as we all are, aware of those.
Yes, that's a great point. The churches, the faith community has been a big piece of downtown for a long time. And had I done my normal presentation, I go through this whole thing about the downtown is the center, and I talk about the business and the jobs and the lawyers and the accountants, and the faith community is actually part of that presentation. And that also expands to other nonprofits and the Harrelson Center.
Sure.
It really is a center of faith and compassion that is housed in downtown. Salvation Army is another one doing critical work for us.
Thank you.
Okay, Ed, we don't have any more questions in the queue, so we do want to thank you very much for doing this. And we appreciate your taking this time. I know you've got your hands full and you're juggling a whole lot of items at once. So we wish you the best of luck, and we're all rooting for the downtown to come roaring back when the time is right. And we know you'll be right in there. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
We do have, I want to very quickly go through some announcements that came in from John Lyon regarding a Rotary golf tournament. It was originally scheduled for April 22nd. They will reschedule it once we're back to face-to-face luncheons at the country club. They will pick a Tuesday to have the outings once that happens. John still has checks from those who signed up, and you can play at the new date. There'd be no need to resubmit another check. If you can't take the new date, he'll return or shred your check. So if you have any questions, call John at 910-274-1981. Also, from our President-elect Robbie Collins to everyone, Alan Quigley is our local area assistant governor. He helps manage the 6 Wilmington clubs, and he's working to set up a Rotary night at Sharks baseball game in July or August for all of our clubs to participate, and he wanted to poll the members for their interest. And Robbie says, please let him know. His email address is Robbie, ROBBYCOLLI @AOL.com. If you're interested in attending an event like this, the cost would be $20 and would include our own picnic session for that Sharks game. And a comment from Charlotte Davis. She says, this has been great. She has to leave. Sorry to have missed you, Charlotte. So Eric, I'm going to throw it back to you.
All right. Well, the last 2 things on our agenda is we have a segment that we've tried to kick off for the last 2 or 3 meetings now called Member Check-In. And that is for you to allow anybody in the membership to make a comment, tell us something that how you've been coping with the pandemic and the stay-at-home orders or anything else along that line. So do we have anybody to participate? If you do, raise your hand so Cleve can spot you and call on you.
We have so many people that I have 3 screens I have to look at. I don't see any hands up right now. Rob Zappel. Rob, unmute yourself, please.
Thanks, Cleve. Thanks, Eric. Ed, also, you may have known about this, but I just wanted to alert everyone I'm attending a press conference today in reference to curfew that the city and the county are going to implement in the downtown area that will begin at 9 p.m. and go till 6 a.m. This is a direct result of the disturbances we've been having that unfortunately in the downtown area. But what's going to be made clear in the press conference, this is not should not affect any of the restaurants downtown. It will be clearly designed for gatherings of more than 10 people to try and get a handle on that on the late night disturbances that we've been having. So you can, I'm sure it'll be covered heavily by the news at 5 o'clock and later this evening. That press conference is happening at 3 today down at the old courthouse. And if that was not on your agenda, I apologize not giving you a heads up before, but you may want to attend that as well. That's all. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much, Rob. President Eric, you have the floor.
All right, then we're going to move on to the four-way test and do our adjournment in our traditional way. These are the four-way test of the things we think, say, and do as Rotarians. First, is it true? Second,
Is it fair to all
Fair to all
concerned?
concerned.
third,
Will it build
Goodwill
goodwill
and better friendship.
fourth,
Will it be beneficial to all concerned?
concerned. Rotary. See you guys.
Take care. Good meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. We'll see you next week.